Welcome to the G2 on 5G, the inside scoop on everything related to 5G. I'm Will Townsend, Senior Analyst with more insights and strategy. I cover networking, infrastructure, and carrier services based in Austin, Texas. And joining me is my colleague again this week, Anshel in San Diego, California. How's it going, Anshel?
Pretty good. Thanks for having me here.
Awesome. Well, again, we're going to cover 6 topics in about 15 minutes. So I'm going to get started with my first one. Today, Microsoft announced its intention to acquire Metaswitch. This is interesting. Back in March, the company announced its intention to acquire Affirmed Networks. And what both companies bring to the Azure cloud are virtualization capabilities. And this is going to allow Microsoft to compete with the likes of Nokia and Ericsson that are offering their own telco-grade cloud service offerings. So it's quite a significant investment, 2 companies within a couple of months. So Microsoft seems to be really serious about its efforts around 5G. Any insights, Anshel?
Yeah, I think there's definitely an interesting angle here. I'm curious as to whether this is a CSP play or is this something different?
Well, from my perspective, it's an infrastructure play, right? So, Microsoft may have, competed with CSPs in the past, but clearly this is focused on bringing depth, telco-grade depth to their Azure service so that they can go after, a new market and go focus on 5G services.
Okay, so would you say that they're competing with like the Ericssons and the Nokias of the world?
Yeah. As I mentioned, they've been offering telco cloud services, for quite some time. I believe, Microsoft's goal is to bring some disruption, given their Azure platform, and offer operators an alternative.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, let's shift. I know that you've got some insight into 5G subscriber numbers.
Yeah, so this week, 2 different places, companies, countries, whatever you want to say, reported 5G subscriber numbers, and one of them was LG U+, which is an operator in Korea, one of the first operators with 5G in the world. And they said that about 10% of their customers are already subscribed to 5G services, which is about 1.5 million customers, because they've got about 15 million total in the country. And they've been offering a lot of services, but right now they're not as innovative as some of their other competitors. But they're still a pretty big carrier, and 5G uptake and coverage in Korea is pretty good.
Yeah.
So if there's coverage and speeds, people are going to use it, and it seems like it's already happening pretty quickly, at least in Korea. And then the other was that the Chinese government said that they have 50 million 5G subscribers. Which seems, somewhat realistic for a company the size or country the size of China. But the thing is that they didn't really offer much of a breakdown of which carriers it was and what those numbers were. And honestly, a lot of people don't really fully trust the Chinese government's reporting numbers on a lot of things. So, a lot of people think these numbers are somewhat fudged, and I'd be inclined to agree because it feels a little bit early considering coverage and speeds in China, and especially considering all of the things that have been happening with COVID, it's really hard to understand that they already hit 50 million, even though they are a country of over 1 billion people.
I would agree with you, and and I follow the big 3 carriers in China, and I'm not seeing a lot of focus on services. It's all about access. So I would tend to agree with you. Now, in contrast, in Korea, I think another operator there, SK Telecom, has done a fantastic job leaning in to services with low latency gaming, AR, VR, which is an area that you cover as well, right? So I tend to believe that the numbers coming out of Korea just because they're focused on services relative to just pure access.
Definitely.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on to the next topic.
Yeah, so my second topic is around Dish. And, as we all know, Dish is working almost top secretly to roll out their network. This has come from some of the divestiture that T-Mobile had to put on the table to make their merger with Sprint happen. And Dish announced this week that they were abandoning their plans to build an IoT network. I think that's smart and wise. because if you look at what Sprint did prior to the merger with T-Mobile, Ivo Rook built an incredible IoT platform with the Curiosity brand, and you've also got other alternatives like LoRaWAN that's more or less focused on sensoring and low power and longer battery life. So I think it would have been really difficult for Dish to get their network deployed and at the same time launch an IoT set of services as well. Any thoughts there?
No, I pretty much agree. I think that it'd be really difficult for them to be successful if they spread themselves too thinly and try and deploy an IoT network at the same time as deploying a consumer network. I think they should really be focusing on just offering a mainstream consumer product that's differentiated and possibly more affordable.
Yeah.
And I don't think they can really do that if they take away resources to build out an IoT network as well.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it's a smart move on their part. Hey, so let's shift gears. We were talking about T-Mobile, and we've talked about them quite a bit over the last couple of weeks, but you had some insights into what they're doing with the 2.5 gigahertz spectrum.
Yeah, so as you know, they've acquired that spectrum from Sprint when they finished their acquisition in April. And they've already, in the last month or so, have already rolled out 2.5 gigahertz in multiple cities, including Philadelphia and New York. And they've basically committed to having a significant, the quote is a furious pace. So they've committed to rolling out thousands of sites this year, which would enable, broad citywide coverage in a lot of metropolitan areas. And they're deploying 2.5 gigahertz 5G at 1,000 overlays per month, moving into May and June. So I think that there's a real high probability that you could see some really significant 5G speeds on T-Mobile's 2.5 gigahertz network, because I think Sprint was heavily underutilizing it. And I think we could see, upwards of 800 megabits per second, or maybe even a gig in the right markets. And it'll be crazy because you'll have millimeter wave plus mid-band plus low band, which is kind of the holy grail of 5G.
Yeah.
Regardless of what carrier you are, it's just the faster you get to that 3-layer network, the faster you can start delivering differentiated services with network slicing and QoS.
Yeah, and I agree. And that's been one of the tremendous synergies of the two companies coming together is having that full spectrum footprint, the low, the mid, and the high band. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I'm going to talk about COVID-19 here in a moment at AT&T, but do you think COVID-19 will affect any of that deployment scenarios that you were talking about?
Not necessarily. I think it could affect, because the way I look at it is a lot of these operators, they're rolling out their networks with the anticipation of what's to come. So they're planning for next year utilization, because when they're upgrading networks today, they're not really thinking that people are going to hop on it immediately. They're really planning for the future. And if more people move over to 5G, these operators have better utilization of their network. They're able to offer more services. They're able to be more profitable. And that's ultimately the reason why they're interested in rolling out 5G. Yeah. So, I don't see them slowing down rolling out 5G. But as you said, some other operators have signaled some potential slowness with 5G due to COVID-19.
Yeah, and that's my third topic this week, and it's AT&T, and they warned that that 5G adoption could be slowed as a result of coronavirus, and that's based on lots of retail locations are still closed, and also you gotta imagine with unemployment claims ringing in pretty highly in the interim, people are going to be a lot more conservative with their spend, and so an average smartphone is not an inexpensive item, right? And so
especially
I think people,
5G one.
Exactly, yeah. And so I think people are they're going to be cautious. I think we'll see. We're getting to see the light at the end of the tunnel here, and hopefully we get through the end of the year and things start bouncing back to normal. But yeah, it was interesting that they came out with that guidance.
Yeah,
it was
I
today.
think some people misconstrued that guidance.
Yeah.
I think it's a guidance of they expect device sales to potentially be down, um,
Right.
and upgrades and things like that. But I don't see people really them losing any customers. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I
Yeah.
think the conversion to 5G might be a little slower because of the lack of new acquisition of new devices.
Mm-hmm.
But I think generally people are going to be still buying new phones. It's just a
Mm-hmm.
question of whether or not they need them versus want them.
Sure.
Some people are still running on ancient iPhones and ancient Android phones. I found out one of my friends recently had a Galaxy S5, and I was like, we're on the 20, right? Like, you're not
Right.
that many generations behind, but we're on the 20 now. So
Yeah.
I think there's people who are definitely upgrading because they need to,
Yeah.
and that's not necessarily going to be a want to as much, at least for as long as unemployment is as high as it is.
Yeah. Well, time will tell. Hey, but your final, topic this week is around Norway's deployment of 5G in Telia and Ericsson. So why don't you provide us some insights into that?
Yeah, so Telia is one of the biggest carriers in Norway, if not the biggest.
Mm-hmm.
They've partnered with Ericsson to roll out their 5G network. They're kind of, um, you know, working entirely with Ericsson, which is next door in Sweden, and they're kind of one of the leading 5G infrastructure vendors. So it doesn't really seem like that much of a surprise that Telia tapped
Mm-hmm.
Ericsson. But they acquired some 700 megahertz spectrum that allows them to really get that coverage.
Yeah.
So the expectation is that half of Norway is going to have 5G by the end of 2021, which is incredibly fast.
It is. Yeah.
And I think realistically they're going to have DSS. They're going to have SA. They
Mm-hmm.
didn't say that they're going to have SA right away,
Yeah.
but I would expect that if you're rolling out a 5G network in almost mid 2020, you're
Yeah.
probably very close to being SA.
Yeah.
I think we're going to start seeing lots of SA networks rolling out by the end of the year, and a ton of them coming through next year. So a
Mm-hmm.
lot of people are buying their 5G equipment, expecting, already to, be ready for SA. So, but yeah, it's really
Mm-hmm.
cool. I would have expected Telia to be a little bit sooner
Yeah.
because Norway in general is a much more technically savvy country. Lots of people have fiber at home. Almost everybody drives electric cars.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a very tech savvy country, and I was a little bit surprised to see Telia only launching now.
Yeah. Well, maybe they've been frozen and they're thawing now. I spent some time there last year, so it gets quite cold there. Well, Anshel, hey, thanks a lot. This has been another great podcast. Why don't you take us home?
Sure. We hope our viewers and listeners this week found our topics interesting. If anyone out there would like to provide us any specific insights on 5G topics for future podcasts, please feel free to reach out to us on social media. Will is at Will Town Tech on Twitter, and I'm at Anshel Sog. So please feel free to reach out to us and have a great weekend. And please tune in again next week.